Kid Felcher. 1,000 welcomes to crann-na-beatha short stories and poetry for April 5th. I'm Terence O'Donnell, your Irish skillet, with more stories and poems from medium writers. I only have 2 stories and a poem this week. The first is Chapter 10 of the ongoing story from Beyond the Waterwall, then a rather lengthy 3rd chapter of our intrepid magician Adelaide from Rachel Anderson Lee, and another wonderful poem by David B. So gather around and let me read to you for a bit. I will add in my commercial break out to the first story today. Just a reminder that all of these podcasts will now be broadcast on WAA Radio on Monday nights at 11 p.m. starting on April 22nd. I hope you consider a donation to help me keep this going. Any amount is fine. I use PayPal for your safety as it allows you to donate without giving up any personal information. You can donate from any country with access to PayPal using your currency. It goes to support all that I give to bring these stories and poems to the world. Now with that, let me get into the first story of this week. And as I said, it's Chapter 10 from Beyond the Waterwall, At the Fisherman's House by Don Woodby, published in the Fiction Writer's Den. Previously, Wren and Mars and the fishermen sailed to the cave. Soldiers were guarding the entrance and shot at them, forcing them to retreat. They stepped out of the fisherman's pickup truck at the end of the dirt road to find themselves surrounded by gigantic trees in the middle of a place with no connection to anything. They hadn't seen a person walking around for a long time. Trench parked the truck on the side of the road near the forest. "We have to follow through here," Trench said, sauntering until they disappeared in between the vegetation. "Can you save this location on your phone?" Mars whispered to Wren before going inside the woods. She nodded and followed closely. They struggled to keep up with the fishermen in the dense, dark forest. Trench strolled, always looking up as if he knew where every stone and every branch was. The grim sounds of distant howls and low guttural growls made a cold shiver run through their spine. Wren instinctively held Mars's hand, squeezing it hard. Trench waited for them at the end of the trail. A large lake in a wide area revealed itself before their eyes. Riverside, there was a wooden house. Old and simple, but it seemed robust. In the backyard, they could see potatoes, carrots, and tomatoes. There were berries on the trees and bushes. "Now I know why he never leaves this place," Wren whispered to Mars, looking around. They followed through a small white stone path to arrive at the house entrance. The fisherman grabbed a large yellow key from the side pocket of his pants and opened the door. The interior was spacious. The old but well-kept furniture covered the wide living room. A big chandelier made of antlers hung on the ceiling. The smell of wood and grass mixed with the remains of a fireplace that was certainly recently lit inspired a sensation of freedom and isolation. A large deerskin rug rested in the middle under a dark wood center table. That, in addition to the natural leather covering the furniture, revealed that Trench was not the type to waste anything. "You can feel at home," Trench said. "I'll go get some beers and show you what I talked about." "Do you think we can trust him?" Wren whispered to Mars as Trench left the living room. "I believe so," Mars said. "It's not a bad idea to keep our eyes wide open, though." "So let's begin," the fisherman said as he came back, holding 2 bottles of beer in one hand and one in the other. He also held a paper roll with some drawings on it. He gave a bottle to each one of them and sat on the couch. He was quiet for a while, looking at the paper. He opened the bottle and took a sip. "Before anything happened, my brother used to spend a lot of time here at my place. He's even got a room over there." He pointed with his nose to a closed door at the end of the small hallway. "When I found out that he died, I started looking for clues. First, I went to his place. Everything was clean. You know, he wasn't the most organized person in the world, so it naturally felt odd to me. Needless to say, I found nothing there. It was all empty, like a hotel room. I gave up for a week. Then I gathered the courage to check his room here. You know, too many memories. I was usually the host between the 2 of us, so going to his place wasn't that hard. Scouring through his stuff here, that was the challenge. There was nothing much here except for this." He pointed to the paper. It was hidden deep inside his closet. I had to think for a long moment until I understood what that was. I mean, look at that. He clacked his hands on the center table, opening the paper on top of it. Some very rudimentary drawings of random figures made it seem like a child's piece of artwork. Mars and Wren exchanged looks as they drank their beer. They stared at the figures for some time, then shook their heads. I know, Trent continued. It doesn't look like anything. That's why it took me so long. After I found it, I studied it for a while. I thought that maybe it didn't mean anything, so I put it aside. But the image was still buried in my head. Then one day I was fishing. You know, the part of the sea where I work is close to the border. That's when I noticed that those lines were very similar to the gates. Each one of those rectangles represents a watchtower. These numbers are the times when they change shifts. Those others here show how long each tower stays unattended when they do it. He flipped the map. On the back, he continued, it shows what I believe to be the vulnerable points on the wall. I think he was planning to escape. He tried it, but they caught him. And they killed him because of it. It's the only logical explanation for everything that has happened. You know, I'm not one to believe in very big coincidences. The drowning, the distance, the map, it has to add up, and the result was that he was assassinated. The fisherman stopped talking, looked down, and beat his hands on his legs. Are you guys hungry? He stood up. I could eat, Wren said, looking at Mars. I'm going to prepare something, Trent said. I'll be back in a minute. The smell of oil and fish that came from the kitchen took over the living room. Wren smiled as her mouth filled with saliva. The fisherman came back with a plate of fried fish and a pot full of rice. Let's sit here. He put the silverware on the large table in the corner. They sat down and started eating. Wren hadn't tasted fresh fish in a long time. She used to before, but getting a hold of those kinds of products was not that easy anymore. There was another map there, too. Trent stood up and walked to the room. He came back, holding another larger roll. This one I couldn't find out what it was. I'm sure it means something, but I just can't imagine any logic behind it. He opened the paper on the table. Wren looked at it for a moment. I can't see anything here either. I thought about it for a long time, but I don't think it matters anyway. I already have my answers as to why he got killed. Now, it is your turn to tell me something. The only question remaining is why you guys were trying to go to that cave. Why was it flooded with soldiers? Mars and Wren looked at each other for a moment. They lingered until the silence began to feel uncomfortable. She took a deep breath and nodded. You're probably not going to believe it, Mars said, but I didn't get shot by anyone in the government. In fact, when I got shot, I wasn't even in this world. I'm not from here. There is no need to tell everything, but I was inside a cave when it happened. I lost my conscience and woke up here. She took care of me because she knew me before, but not exactly me, the other me from this world. And I knew her in my world, her other version. Now I'm stuck, and we need to go to the cave to see if there's a way to go back. This is a very short version of the story, Wren said. I wouldn't expect anything different from you. You're right. I don't believe it because it makes no sense, Trent said. Sorry, it's just too much. That would explain the soldiers there, though. I wouldn't either, Mars said, grabbing a piece of fish, but it's true. And yes, the fact that they were so interested in that cave just corroborates what I'm saying. I wouldn't believe it, Wren said, but I saw him there. I know him. It couldn't be a coincidence. He was younger here, and I saw him die. Some days later, he appeared, older. The fisherman squinted and ruffled his hair. So, if this is true, and I'm not saying it is, what would be your plan now? I mean, that cave is surrounded by soldiers. You can't go through. We'll have to find a way to come back there, Mars said, and paused for a while. I just don't know how yet. But we have other priorities until the time comes. They finished eating, and the fisherman gathered the dishes and brought them to the kitchen. Take a picture of the map, Mars whispered to Wren as soon as he left the room. She didn't flinch. She quickly snatched her phone from her purse. I'll drive you back to the beach, Trent said bluntly as they returned to the living room. They walked back home from the beach in almost complete silence. The amount of information they gathered that day was massive, but they couldn't exchange their impressions just yet. The streets were always full of eyes and ears. They still needed to linger. The cave, the map, the trustworthiness of the fisherman. I want to wait to get home to speak about everything, Wren said, but I just need to get this out of my chest. She stopped for a moment and slowly checked her surroundings. He talks too much. I know. I'm exhausted. I just want to get home and rest. We need to get into that cave, Mars thought to himself as they walked. No more words were spoken until they got home. All right, stay tuned next week for the next chapter. I want to invite everyone to listen to crann-na-beatha Stories and Poetry every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Reese Across America Radio. Search out www.reaseacrossamerica.org/radio by typing in the word Reese in these mobile apps, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, or TuneIn. Or find them on a web browser and join us to listen to the show and support WAA Radio, Whiskey Alpha Alpha Radio for any veterans listening. Reese Across America is a nonprofit radio station that supports veterans programs and organizations that help needy veterans. By joining us at Reese Across America, you are helping to support veterans in need across the U.S. So search us out and enjoy the shows they have to offer and thank a veteran while you're at it. Now I want to take another minute or so to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going and to advertise my website. I've set up a donation tab on the crann-na-beatha Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crann-na-beatha.com, using PayPal for your security. This way there is no credit card info saved anywhere, and you can use any currency you wish from around the world. If you like this podcast, please share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. Since the show is audio only, just take the website name from the podcast logo shown here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. There you'll see a homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. And on the menu bar at the top, there are links at all the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to want to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your patronage and support. Now back to the show. Now my next story is pretty lengthy, so bear with me here. I'm going to probably go a little slow on this one just because. It's called A Magician Never Repeats Her Mistakes by Rachel Anderson Lee, published in the Kraken Lore. This story follows events in A Magician Never Reveals Her Secrets, and a magician is never late. The crystals in the window display of mystic spirit gifts glowed as Adelaide approached. She didn't notice. Too focused on her phone screen and a voice narrating over a video of her pull a dollar out of a Satsuma trick. Adelaide finally looked up when the chimes above the door to her aunt's shop jangled. The scent of sandalwood incense and orange essential oil washed over her. "Well, someone's been through hell and back," Aunt Maeve teased from behind bowls of silver-bladed charms and bundles of sage on the checkout counter. Her favorite tarot deck rested beneath her hand like a purring cat. The rest of the shop was stocked with tables and racks of New Age paraphernalia, beeswax candles, geodes, rune sets, pendulums, dream catchers, singing bowls, ceramic dragons, and plenty more. Adelaide had spent most of her high school afternoons packing online orders and arranging the displays. "Ha, very ha, Auntie. Do you have any idea what it takes to get brimstone smoke out of a silk top hat?" Maeve's grin cut a white crescent beneath her hazel eyes. Dark curls streaked with salt-white strands framed her meddling elder expression. "I might. So, what's his name?" Adelaide glanced away, only to accidentally make eye contact with a leering stone gargoyle. "What's whose name?" Maeve reached down to the counter and held up the Emperor Tarot card. In most decks, the Lord of Major Arcana had a long white beard, sat on a heavy throne, and held an orb and a scepter. The man on Maeve's card was clean-shaven, dark-haired, lounged in a swivel chair, and held a shiny silver smartphone. James' striking green eyes stared out of the enchanted paper, and Adelaide had to look away before her cheeks grew too warm. "Oh, him, James. Did my box arrive?" "Got it for you right here." May pulled it out from under the counter, but when Adelaide reached for it, her aunt's hand held it down. "I did a reading for you." Adelaide groaned. "Ooh. Stop whining. You'll want to hear this. The King of Wands is back in town." She picked up another tarot card, this one revealing a young man with curly brown hair and in a flashy white suit, lounging on a throne beneath pointed stage lights. For some people, the King of Wands was a great card. What's not to love about an energetic and visionary leader? For Adelaide, It might as well have been death. Not even Maeve knew how bad that breakup had been. Sure, the cards told her some vague things, but the details... I saw this on my way to the shop and picked it up for you, Maeve added. She reached into her pocket of her hand-dyed tunic and pulled out a folded flyer advertising a magic show at the theater downtown, tonight. The part that caught Adelaide's attention was the glossy photo of her ex-boyfriend grinning past a retro-style pistol and the caption, "Can he really catch a bullet?" Adelaide crumpled his stupid face in one hand. Over a dozen magicians, some way better than Adelaide's ex, had died doing the bullet catch trick. It was one thing to levitate someone a few feet off the ground. If the mechanism broke, the worst thing that could happen would be a few bruises. But to let somebody fire a gun at your face was the kind of risk that no sane magician should take. Was he trying to die? I did another reading for your future love life. Auntie, Adelaide snapped, even as May pulled out another card. The chimes jangled over the door, announcing a new customer, and Maeve slipped the card under Adelaide's package. The instant a hint of amber and ginger wafted past, Adelaide knew why. "James," Maeve greeted. "I was hoping I'd get to meet you in the flesh today. How can I help you?" Adelaide finally turned and watched him fumble for words. Even when caught off guard, James looked strikingly sharp. The silvery buttons on his black jean jacket and the shards of light reflecting off his dark hair could have tempted any magpie. Thank you. I'm, looking for things to purify and protect my niece's bedroom from evil influences," he said. Maeve nodded. "Do you have a diffuser for essential oils? Anything citrus is good. Bergamot, grapefruit, lemon, and I can get some black tourmaline and hematite to place in the area. One sec." She disappeared behind a tasseled curtain in the back, but not before sneaking a wink at Adelaide. Of all the people, at all the times. "I didn't expect to run into you here, Adelaide. How have you been?" he asked. He'd been easier to talk to when she wanted to hex him. "Oh, good, good. Thanks. And you?" "Great, yeah. Thanks for asking." The awkward silence stretched like a shadow over the grave of their pleasantries. Adelaide considered grabbing her package off the counter and dashing away, but if Maeve's tarot card showed James' face, or worse, both of their faces, that could raise an uncomfortable number of questions. "Olivia, my sister-in-law, keeps bothering me to invite you to a thank-you dinner," James said, "but I don't have your number. No chance you're free tonight, is there?" "Actually, something just came up." She tried to slip the paper into her back pocket, but as she did, its edge slid across her skin. Ouch! It fell. James picked it up. Any second he was going to open it and ask about Adelaide's ex-boyfriend, and... "Are you all right?" James asked with genuine concern. "Just a paper cut," Adelaide winced. A drop of blood welled along her palm's heartline. "May I?" James extended his own hand. "There's something I learned at the consortium that could help you, if you'd like." Adelaide offered her own hand. James put the crumpled flyer on the counter and gently traced his fingers across her skin, careful to avoid the cut itself. For a second, tingling blossoms of sensation bloomed in her palm, but Adelaide wasn't sure if it was from the magic or James's touch, or both. Then the small pain was gone, and the paper cut was gone. Adelaide's eyes widened. "Show me," she demanded, grabbing his wrist. "Teach me how you did that, please." James' surprise was short-lived as Maeve swept back through the curtain, carrying a wicker basket of potential purchases. Adelaide had to bite her tongue as Maeve pattered on about the purifying properties of lemon and the differences between amethyst and obsidian as protective stones. James had to show her, teach her, or... She waited for him to pay, snatched her box off the counter, and hustled after him. "Card's in your back pocket," Maeve yelled after her. "Send it back after you see it." "Thanks, Auntie. Love you," Adelaide called back. "James, wait. Seriously. Please. Tell me how you did that. You owe me. This is the favor I want. Teach me how to heal a little cut like that." James frowned. "Why? Do you get a lot of paper cuts?" "No, it's complicated. But I need you to show me how you did that, like now." James opened his mouth like he was thinking of saying something teasing, but the urgency in her eyes stopped him short. "I can't. It took me weeks to learn and months to practice. Even magic doesn't offer shortcuts to healing." Adelaide tried not to think about the cancer that stole her brother-in-law from her sister. But this situation was different. This was... "Then I need your help. I need you to heal a little cut for someone else," she insisted. "Tonight, please." James stared at her for a long time, then nodded. All right, fine. But you give me your number. Adelaide hesitated, not because of the number. Honestly, she was glad he'd asked. But she really wished she didn't have to involve James in the fiasco with her ex. But if she didn't, that poor idiot would probably die. Don't be selfish, Adelaide winced. All right, deal. James was kicking himself for trusting Adelaide so blindly. Every step of the way there had been a red flag, but he ignored it. When they'd arrived at the theater, he tried to tease her about the magician and the flashy white tailcoat on the posters. He was standing amidst a shower of crimson rose petals. You'd make a cute couple, he mocked. He could be your assistant. I used to be his, Adelaide answered, 3 years ago, before we broke up. James had tried to swallow his tongue, and been pretty good at it until Adelaide snuck them in, got them hidden backstage, and he'd ended up sitting knee to knee with her on a crate in the shadows. He could feel her flinch every time the jerk on stage said, "My lovely assistant." Finally, he couldn't take it any more. How do you know this guy is going to get a paper cut tonight? He asked, hoping to distract them both. Adelaide shook her head. I never said paper cut. Small cut, but not from paper. James snorted, but waited for the applause to fade before leaning closer to whisper, Same difference. How do you know? I don't know, she winced. I think. He hasn't been back here in 3 years, and he's going to perform a life-threatening trick. James recoiled. You think he'll be shot for real, Adelaide? I can't heal a bullet wound. She shook her head again, but before she could explain more, the magician on stage announced, The trick I'm about to perform is one of the deadliest in the history of stage magic. Adelaide's breath shuddered as she drew it in. Idiot, she breathed out in the exhalation. It's just a trick, James reassured her. First, let me demonstrate that this rifle is very real and accurate by firing it at the target. Everyone, cover your ears. The target is rigged with a squib. That's a little bit of explosive. I know what a squib is, Adelaide hissed back. James leaned away and listened with the rest of the audience as the gun went off. Next, I'll need a volunteer from the audience to sign this bullet, the magician declared. He'll palm it at some moment, James muttered. I know, Adelaide hissed as the stage magician falsely declared that he was loading the gun. And now, I'm going to stand behind this pane of glass, the magician announced. For most of the show, James and Adelaide hadn't been able to see much more than the occasional shadow. By now they saw the white-clad magician clearly against the black fabric of the rear curtain. He looked confident and charismatic, peaceful and poised, full of vitality and enthusiasm. My lovely assistant, Adelaide winced. We'll get ready. James felt Adelaide's hand on his knee. Energy tinkled through his leg and up his spine. Aim! Adelaide squeezed. Her gaze was fixed on the stage magician, but James was the one who took her hand. Fire! Adelaide whirled to look away as the glass shattered and her ex-boyfriend staggered dramatically and coughed and spat a bullet into his own hand. Uproarious applause filled the theater. The triumphant magician held up the signed bullet and took his bows. It was never a real gun, James reminded Adelaide. She swallowed and stood up slowly, peering past the curtain sightline to get a glimpse of him from behind as he bowed. Thank you all very much, the magician said. Thank you, thank you. It wasn't until the magician walked off that Adelaide startled out of her stupor and grabbed James's hand. We have to get out of here, she hissed. What? James gaped as she pulled him away. James let her haul him all the way outside into the alley behind the theater before he yanked his arm out of her grip. Okay, I don't know what that was back there, but at least tell me why you're doing all this, he demanded. It doesn't matter, Adelaide snapped, worrying on him. I just thought I needed your help, but I guess I was wrong. So I'm sorry I wasted your time. I just thought you could save him if... Adelaide, after nearly 2 hours of listening to him on the theater sound system, the magician's unenhanced voice was disappointingly thin. His stage makeup was too dramatic for the shadowed street, and his costume seemed clownish. The cigarette in his hand didn't encourage James' respect either. The worst part was the way the performer looked at Adelaide, like the entire world had shifted, like he'd gone from a sad reality into a beautiful dream. James frowned. Adelaide was so much more than a dream. No, Adelaide breathed. James saw the same world shift reflected in Adelaide's eyes, but hers contained all the horror of a nightmare. A moment later, the magician coughed. His hands flew to his throat. He fell to his knees. When he coughed again, blood painted his lips. "James," Adelaide screamed, grabbing his arm, "the cut! It's in his esophagus. You have to heal him, please." She raced back to the landing outside the stage door and crouched at the performer's side. "It's okay," she breathed, as the poor guy struggled for air he couldn't get. "My friend's going to heal you." "Adelaide," James said, "I can't." She turned on him. "What? No, you healed my hand." James held up his own palm, revealing the paper cut across his heart line. Her eyes widened in realization, but James spoke anyway, as if the slow rhythm of his words could ease her panic. "Even if I had his consent and belief, which I don't, I could only move his wound into my own body. Magic doesn't offer shortcuts to healing." Adelaide took a shuddering breath and stared at the dying magician. "Okay, that's okay. Plan B. I did it before. I can do it again." "Adelaide!" James made her name a warning, only to be ignored. She closed her eyes and placed her hands on either side of the magician's face. As she breathed, her hands shifted just slightly. James blinked, because now he was seeing double, an echo image of the dead magician overlapping the original, but when he looked around, everything else was sound and stable. When he looked back, the double had shifted even farther away from the original and was growing more solid. The two were identical, save one key difference. The new image wasn't bloody, and he was breathing. "What the A snap resounded across James's senses, setting him off balance, leaving his ears ringing and the taste of copper in his mouth. "Did you just—" "No," Adelaide cried. "I didn't. I couldn't, because you're here. This is all your fault." She clutched the dead magician's white jacket. "I'm sorry, Rowan," she choked. James took a step away, swallowing. Whatever had just happened, Adelaide had made it pretty clear that she didn't want him involved anymore. Part of him was tempted to respect that. It was as good an excuse as any to leave now. Nothing about this situation seemed clean or easy or comfortable. If he vanished, he could avoid the worst of it. But leaving wouldn't fix anything. It would only mean Adelaide would have to deal with it alone. So James conjured a handkerchief instead and offered it out. Adelaide took it. She didn't tell him to go away again. When he sat down beside her, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she repeated, eventually sniffing back the last of her tears. This time her apology was for James. "Nothing about this is your fault. It's mine." "That doesn't seem true, but I'd appreciate an explanation," James said. "Maybe after we call the authorities." Adelaide nodded. "Yeah, okay." It took several hours to deal with the ambulances and give their statements to the police. It wasn't pleasant, but it was necessary. Eventually, James and Adelaide were free to go. Adelaide waited until they were out of the theater district before she spoke. "I met Rowan this summer after I graduated high school," she said, "and I thought it was adorable that he'd pretend to pull flowers from behind my ear and say he could guess the number I was thinking, after doing a bunch of math. It was always 5. James stopped at a red light, but it was late enough now that there were no other cars and no pedestrians crossing. Adelaide stared at the road. "I learned a lot of my close-up tricks and stagecraft from him. He asked me to be his assistant. We started dating, but I never showed him what I could really do." James nodded, though he guessed as much. Consortium would have been involved much earlier if Adelaide's magic act had been big enough to fill a theater. But he was restless, reckless, wanted to get into bigger, more dangerous tricks, like the aquarium illusion and underwater escapology. And some kind of razor-swallowing trick, James guessed? Adelaide nodded. 3 years ago, he was messing around during a dress rehearsal at the very same theater we are at tonight. The idea of the trick is to palm the blade before it goes in your mouth. But his hand slipped, and he panicked, swallowed, and it was just a little cut. But he died, James realized, sparing a glance in her direction. "No one else saw," Adelaide murmured, "so I just... You don't need to say it," James winced. He'd seen what she'd been trying to do earlier. If it had worked, she would have stolen the truth of the performer's death straight out of reality. She would have replaced it with a nearly perfect lie, even without the poor guy's consent. That kind of magic, if the consortium knew what she could do. But how were you going to pay for that? James wondered aloud as he turned down the street towards Adelaide's house. There was a cost to all magic. If Adelaide moved a mountain, then she'd have to, by necessity, pay into the abyss. Memory, Adelaide admitted softly. "Last time, the only one who remembered it ever happened was me. I took all of his memories of our time together and fed them into the spell. That's why it was so volatile. If he ever remembered what happened, the spell would break. He'd go back to how he was. He'd die. With a jolt, James realized that she'd already done a smaller version of the same thing to him. The magic she'd used to give him antlers had also been uncannily powerful, but similarly volatile. For a long time, Adelaide continued, I thought leaving him was enough, but when I saw that he'd be back in that theater, I thought it might bring back memories. James turned into the parking lot outside her apartment complex and found a spot. Without the low rumble of the engine and tires, Adelaide's voice sounded all too clear. She didn't get out. I thought the danger of doing the trick would trigger something, she continued, but it didn't. I did. If I had just stayed away. James wished he could reach out to her, give her solace, closure, tell her it wasn't her fault. It wasn't your fault, said an unfamiliar voice. James nearly jumped out of his skin when he heard the voice from the back seat of his car. Oh, no. No. He had to. But Adelaide was staring at the translucent apparition as well, so James silenced his instincts and let her watch. The magician's ghost, Rowan's ghost, looked almost exactly as he had in the finale, from the wave of his curls to his cocky smile, like he could really catch a bullet in his teeth. Adelaide, listen to me. You can't blame yourself for what happened, okay? I did a stupid thing. That's on me, not you. But you gave me 3 extra years to enjoy. I got to live my dream, and that's way more than I deserved. So it's okay. I don't blame you. Honestly, it's good to see you again. I mean, I didn't know I was missing you, but I did miss you. Silent tears streamed from Adelaide's eyes. The ghost reached forward as if to brush them away or touch her hair. But he passed a hand closer to her ear instead and came away with a single ephemeral rose. Thank you, Adelaide. Goodbye. It faded away altogether by the time Adelaide managed to say goodbye in return. Adelaide woke up in her clothes, hungry and heartsore. The grief she could handle. It had changed shape since she'd last touched it, and honestly this shape felt easier to handle. There were still sharp points, pieces of the old relationship she'd have to unpack more thoroughly another time, but it isn't quite as heavy anymore. Something about James witnessing that whole mess had helped, somehow. When had he gone from being a massive jerk to the literal shoulder she cried on? The frustrating paradox of it was enough to get her up and stumble through her morning routine. She was halfway through a bowl of cereal before something snagged in her memory. Ghosts didn't just appear, not benevolent ones at least. To take a visible form outside of someone's dreams, a living person had to actually lend them energy. They had to be summoned. There was a word, Adelaide knew, for people who could summon the spirits of the dead. Not a very polite word, but an accurate one. Necromancer. James was a freaking necromancer. She yanked her phone off its charging cable, fully intending to call him and demand an explanation, before realizing that she didn't have his number. He had hers, but not the other way around. In the next moment, 2 things happened. First, Adelaide's phone began to ring, unknown number. Second, she noticed the tarot card Aunt Maeve had magicked into her back pocket yesterday afternoon. It was lying on the floor now, peeking out from under her other laundry. James, she asked the caller as she reached for the card. No, Miss Westvale, said a cool, arrogant voice. My name is Stephen Glacier. I'm calling on behalf of the consortium. Adelaide froze, card in hand. What? We've noticed you've been involved in some unusual magical activity recently. Consider this your summons to a formal inquiry. Your regional representative will meet you outside to escort to your hearing in 20 minutes. Refusal to attend will be met with significant consequences. Good day, Miss Westvale. He hung up. Adelaide shuddered. Rowan's death, the looming consortium hearing, another secret about James's power, all of it made Maeve's tarot reading into her love life seem frivolous and insignificant. And yet, Adelaide flipped the card over. The 5 of Cups. Standing on a patch of bare earth, surrounded by a gray sky, a figure in a long black coat wept, face hidden. The tower and bridge framed a clear blue river in the background. In the foreground, 3 spilt goblets claimed the mourner's attention. The 2 upright goblets behind the figure were ignored. The weeping figure in the image, Adelaide noted, was herself. She took a slow, steadying breath and focused on the 2 full goblets. Yes, this was a time of grief and regret, but there was still hope, if she could bring herself to see it. The river would flow on. She held the card for a moment longer, then nodded, giving it permission to return to Maeve's deck. To send it, she tossed the card in the air and looked away, fully aware they would never fall to her bedroom floor. 18 minutes later, Adelaide was striding out of her apartment building. The tails of her sparkly tailcoat flapped behind her, and the heels of her black boots rapped the pavement like flint striking fire. She knew exactly how intimidating she looked as she strode up to the consortium's regional representative and glared into his bright green eyes. If the consortium got my number from you, then you owe me way more than $42. And that's the end of that long story. I hope you enjoyed it. The big thing is she may be writing another one, so I'm gonna keep my ears peeled here, and if she writes another story, I'll read it to you. Lastly, I have a short poem by Dave B. As I mentioned last week, he's fast becoming one of my favorite poets, so I will continue to showcase his art here as much as I can. This one's entitled Life's Weave by Dave B. In life's weave, I delve into the profound interconnectedness of existence, mirrored through a tree's life. This poem unfolds the narrative of a solitary tree, standing as a beacon of unity and individuality amidst nature's vast expanse. With each stanza, I weave a tale that transcends the mere physical, exploring how branches, roots, leaves, and blossoms echo the broader, complex tapestry of life itself. Through the metaphor of a tree, I aim to illuminate the intricate dance of life and death, the fleeting beauty of moments, and the enduring cycles of nature. It's a reflection on the silent wisdom held in nature's embrace, urging a deeper contemplation of our place within the universe's grand weave. In the heart of the forest stands a tree, alone, yet never solitary. Branches stretch, a calligraphy against the sky, writing the tales of wind and time. Roots delve deep, embracing the earth, whispering secrets of birth and worth. Leaves unfurl, a verdant dance of light and shade. In their veins the sun's song played. Leaves unfurl, a verdant dance of light and shade. In their veins the sun's song played. Blossoms bloom, brief sparks in the endless weave, a reminder of what we live and leave. Seasons turn, cycles of joy and decay, each leaf a story, a part of the fray. In this tree, the universe finds its echo, life's weave, a tapestry we slowly sew. So stands the tree, a testament to life's intricate bond, in its silence, a profound wisdom found. I hope that kind of strikes a tug on you. I know it does me, for my own spiritual beliefs. I'm all about trees. So with that, that's all I have for you this week. I hope I've given you something to think about and some entertainment here for this week. And I'll be back again next week with some more stories and poems for you. So I'll say goodbye and enjoy your week. Slantya. Gara Mahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. Maybe one of them might touch your heart a little. Disclosure for everyone. In order to read the complete stories and poems, you'll need to sign up for a subscription to Medium. If I see a link by the author on one of the stories to allow everyone to read it, I will let you know in the newsletters. Please return again next week for another episode of crann-na-beatha Stories and Poetry. As a Sean K., I want to continue to delight you with a story or a poem that may bring you a smile or make you think a little bit after we part for the day. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. Long life and fair health to you. Salfada Augusprech, Slánche Chocolate. Slán go foil. Goodbye for now.